and taking half your money. Enjoy that. Tell me how that works out for you, buddy. Like, I think men should have choice. The ultimate thing for men to have is choice. I'm not telling men out here to go sleep with a bunch of women. That's a bad idea. What I am telling you, though, is that a bunch of women need to find you attractive. You don't need to sleep with a bunch of women, but a bunch of women need to find you attractive. It is your prime directive at this point in your life. It is your prime directive as a man to become maximally attractive.
Let's impact some men today. I think we're gonna do a great job. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Modern Man Podcast, where we are on a mission to connect men in pursuit of their potential. I encourage you to join us as we embrace discomfort, cultivate community, and put wind in each other's sails. Now, before we jump into today's episode, first I'm going to ask that you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share this podcast with other like-minded men so you can get a new episode each and every single week and help us spread the message. For the fellas watching, I encourage you to check out the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. It's a support group of men where you can find the accountability, mentorship you need to achieve your goals. Join us and become a community of like-minded men on a mission to improve themselves and elevate their capacity for life. I'm excited because we're going to get some wind in our sails today from my guest. It is my honor to introduce retired U.S. Air Force captain. Thank you for your service. Former portfolio manager and founder of Men of Action, Michael Sartain, on the podcast. Michael, thanks for jumping on, man.
Hey, Ted. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good to have you on. And before we jump into today's episode, I first want to give you the stage, give you the microphone, which you're very familiar with. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But hey, the podcast is yours. Speak to the audience directly. Tell them who you are, what you do, and then we can kind of jump a little bit into today's topic.
Well, when I got out of the military in 2011, I spent a little bit of time, traveling. I remember I hadn't taken leave in 3 years. And one day I came to Las Vegas and I spent a full week here in Las Vegas. It was during the NBA All-Star weekend. And while I was here, I was like, holy crap, this is the most fun I've had with the least amount of work. And I'm talking about living here as a local. I'm not talking about coming here and visiting. Like I get, you pretty much, when you live here, you get everything for free. If you have a bunch of girls with you, you get tables for free, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, the point is I moved here and I started working in this like nightlife group and started throwing these events. We started doing these little charity events, and then we started throwing pageants, and it started getting progressively bigger and bigger. And I started to notice that the bigger the events were happening, the more high status guys came into my life that I was able to meet and wanted to meet me. I remember going to a Ty Lopez speech one time, and Ty and I were friends. We're probably closer friends now, but we were kind of friends back then. And I showed up with 4 or 5 girls, and I remember everyone stopping and looking at me, because usually at those self-help conferences, what do you see? Just dudes everywhere. It's just 99% guys. And so I would just come and I'd bring 4 models with me, and I would have pretty girls with me everywhere I wanted. And I was like, man, it was just a really interesting situation where I would get invited to the Playboy Mansion, and I was hosting the Maxim parties. And like the girls that I were dating without really any effort were prettier than anyone I'd ever dated before, when I lived in Dallas, San Antonio, Abu Dhabi, when I lived in Los Angeles, when I lived in Kansas, when I lived in Georgia, all these other places. And I was like, I'm doing less and I'm getting more out of my social life. What's going on here? And then I was like, I wonder. So I started getting asked to go and speak at different things. And it was actually back in 2008, my friend Mystery, Eric Von Markovic, told me about the concept of social circle, which is something I kind of understood. I used to manage a gentleman's club from 2000, 2004. And I would go out with, like, one of the girls would have a birthday party, and I would take a group of girls out with me to a bar in Austin, Texas. And it was just really funny how they didn't even check our IDs. We just walked right in. They didn't ask us for a credit card. They just gave us drinks. And everyone in the bar wanted to know who I was. And this experience was like, I didn't know there was a term for it. The ultimate irony is I'm a graduate from the University of Texas at Austin, which is where the foremost evolutionary psychology department on earth is. The Bus Laboratories at the University of Texas at Austin is the foremost evolutionary psychology laboratory on earth. And Dr. Bus is literally there while I'm at school, but I hadn't met him at this point. And I didn't know there were people actually studying this phenomenon of intersexual dynamics and social proof. And so fast forward, 2015, I ended up hosting the red carpet for the Maxim Halloween party, and everything just blew up from there. I started hosting teatro parties, what's it called, Smash Global, which is a MMA charity. I started doing ring announcing. I started, like, all these things just started to come into my life, and it started to get exponentially spiraling up. And again, with very little effort. Now at
Yeah.
this point, I'm dating like legitimate supermodels. Like, I'm dating girls with 8, 9 million followers, and it's not even like a big deal to me. And it doesn't really hit me until I go back to Dallas for like a high school reunion, or I go back to Dallas, or I go back to Austin and I see my friends from college, and I realize that their lives are very different. They're at kid number 3. They've gotten pretty overweight. They've put on a lot of debt. They've maybe had to switch jobs because of a economic downturn. And I start thinking, like, that's weird. I get job offers all the time. What's going on? And I know, Ted, I'm not that smart. There's nothing special about me. Why is it that I have so many opportunities to go to different places? Why have I have so many opportunities to date beautiful women? Why did I have so many opportunities to? I got 2 job offers this month. Um, and I'm like, you guys know I own my own business. I'm not going to take your job. I appreciate it. But it's like, the funny thing is, I'm an entrepreneur now, and now I'm more employable than at any point in my life before. It makes no sense.
Hmm.
Like, I wasn't busting my ass at a 9 to 5. I was building my brand. So, you keep going. And then around 2019, I'm like, how can I give this to other people? And I've been giving speeches at different places on different concepts in self-help. The one that people would ask me the most about was women, though, because I would host all these bikini competitions. And there was always pictures of me with like really pretty girls. So I finally came out with the course. One time we were I was co-hosting a friend of mine's show, and he's also a self-help coach. And I was talking about guys who, and by the way, I have nothing but respect for Tony Robbins, but I was talking about guys who go to Tony Robbins seminars, and then at the end they hug their buddy and they cry and they go back and they're overweight and they're living in their mother's basement. A week later, they've made no changes in their life. And because Tony Robbins essentially sells a feeling. And I'm like, man, the markup on feelings is infinite. The cost of goods sold on a feeling is 0, right? It's really easy to sell a feeling. I was like, if I ever started a course, I would call it Men of Action. That's what I would do, because I'm not trying to sell you a feeling. I'm trying to get you to take action. Again, not knowing at this time, Ted, there's actually a thing called behavioral activation therapy, BAT. Just like there's
Yeah.
DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and um, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. There's one called BAT, which is behavioral activation therapy. And it works really well for men. And this is the concept of, if I go out and take action, if I go out and build the business, go to the gym, go out, do things with friends, get out in the sunlight, all these kind of things, I can cure my own depression, right? And which makes sense from an evolutionary standpoint. And then later on, Ty Lopez introducing me to Dr. Buss, who I ironically, again, we went to the same university, but I'd never met him. And then reading Dr. Buss's books, and then seeing an actual tacit studies showing that the reality that I was experiencing wasn't just my reality. It was like, throughout history, men who were able to network always were able to garner more resources and had higher sexual status. It's always been the way. They had a higher sexual market value. And so I just started to figure out ways to compile this entire program. The first program, Men of Action, came out in October of 2020. And then the second program came out in October of 2021. And we put the 2 programs together. It's 114 modules, about 65 hours long. So this is,
Dang.
I've said this a million times, this is the most comprehensive male self-improvement course in history, because like, it would be like if Jocko Willink taught dating and lifestyle. Jocko Willink doesn't teach you how to set up a social media profile, but he does teach you leadership. Jocko is the greatest at teaching you leadership. And then think about all the people in the dating space. Do they teach you anything about leadership? Of course not. Do they teach you anything about e-commerce or building a brand? They do not. And then the brand building guys, like, do they teach you anything about fitness or leadership? Do they teach you anything about dating? No. I put all of it together. Again, like Ted, you were saying this before, you're a meteorologist. You have built a brand as a meteorologist. I have no doubt whatsoever. You have been at a bar, someplace in some social setting, and a woman very attractive has come up to you and say, like, oh, I know you from television. So your brand building makes you more marketable in your professional career, and it also makes you more attractive to the opposite sex. That right there is the bat hitting. That is the 400-foot home run right there. That is exactly what I teach in my program. Using brand building, which helps you with sexual selection and social status, we teach you how to do that. And the end result is this. You're such a great example of this. You understand when I don't know how old you are, Ted, but I'm 47. I turned 47 on Saturday. So you're
Happy birthday.
I appreciate that. When I was growing up, you were Arnold
Yeah.
Schwarzenegger was a 10 out of 10 famous, and Tom Cruise was a 10 out of 10 famous. And maybe you could say Ronald Reagan was a 10 out of 10 famous. Madonna, Michael Jackson were 10 out of 10 famous. Mike Tyson was a 10 out of 10. They were famous. Everyone knew who they were. And then you had like a janitor who was like a 0 out of 10 famous, but there was no mid-tier level of fame. Maybe like your mayor was like a mid-tier level of fame because there was no social media. You were either famous because the Hollywood industrial complex made you famous. You were on Vogue, you won an NBA championship, something like that, or you were nothing. There wasn't like levels of fame. There was like legitimately famous because you were in a movie, or you just weren't famous at all. Now, fast forward, because of social media, you would still say today, like The Rock would be a 10 out of 10 famous, right? Kevin Hart would be a 10 out of 10. Cristiano Ronaldo would be, I believe he has more followers than anyone or something like that. He would be 10 out of 10 famous. But then where do I put like Aiden Ross and like KSI and guys like that? Where do they're like a 7 or out of 10 famous. Where would I put like Patrick Bet-David and guys like that who are really good streamers? Where would I put Candace Owens? They're like a 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10 famous, right? So we have different levels of fame. Well, what about this, man? Where would you say in your city, you're probably like a 6 or a 7 out of 10 famous, but like overall in the country, if anybody else has seen you, you're probably a 1 or a 2. And in your city, you're like a 3 or a 4 level of fame. You're famous enough. I'll bet you live in North Carolina, Charlotte.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bet you if we went to a really nice restaurant in Charlotte, you might even have the chef come out and greet you. And bro, if you're on a date and the chef comes out and greets you, that's going to be a really good date. That's going to be a really good date. Bro, if you imagine you're on a date with a girl, it's your first date, and a girl comes up, oh man, I've seen you on TV, and they're asking to take pictures with you. And they ask your girl who's a 10 that you're on a first date with to hold the camera to take a picture of you with some other dude. She's like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, that's essentially what happens. So now you at a 2 or a 3 level of famous, every girl in your city has seen your face. Every place that you want to work at has like at least aware of you. You get people coming up and taking pictures with you. Do you think it's hard to get in a nightclub when people are coming up and taking pictures with you, dude? Like all these things with these access that other men don't have. And by the way, we can get into the dating space if you want, but the dating space is becoming progressively worse as far as in real life. If you guys have noticed, anyone who's watching this who's over the age of like 40, if you guys you remember what nightclubs or bars or any kind of like place you go have brunch, any sort of in real life interactions where men and women who are single are supposed to meet, frat party, whatever you want to call it. If you remember 20, 30 years ago, like Daytona Beach, do you remember those MTV Daytona Beach? And what is it's just nothing but girls. When you go out in real life now, there are no girls. It is madness. You go to nightclubs now and it is like 2/3 or 3/4 men everywhere because women are getting their validation through social media. And so the women, the attractive single women have sort of been sucked out of the in real life market. And so the way that you end up meeting them now is by having a really great social media presence and by throwing incredible events where you tilt the balance in your scale. I went out for my birthday Thursday, and it was me and 22 girls or 24 girls. That was it. There was no guys. And then I had 2 or 3 of my guy friends show up. And so I'm at a table and it's 4 guys and it's 24. I have pictures to prove this if you want to see it. And that's how I set my birthday up every year. I don't invite any guys. And then what I did on Saturdays, I had a basketball tournament and I had 20 of my guy friends show up and we played a basketball tournament. So my guys come on Saturday, but the girls come on Thursday. And that's the way I would do it. And so what I try to generate for men, and it's very easy to do with just a little bit of brand building, is I try to create a level 2 or 3, what I call a mid-tier level of fame. And when you have that, now all of a sudden getting a job becomes easier because also, by the way, your boss, can you imagine, just imagine, Ted, this whole thing, this podcast right here, you get to the point where you're getting 200,000 views of video on YouTube. Your employer now understands that is a leverage point in your contract. You know that, right? You know that your agent is going to use that as a leverage point in your future contract. You have built a brand, so now professionally you're more viable. And now every time a woman understands, I have a competent man who has access to scarce resources, I can't leave him. I can't let this one get away. And so now you have more women competing for your attention. And so this is throughout history, it's just been like this. Throughout history, only 40% of men and 80% of women have reproduced. There's been a bottom 60% of men that just don't reproduce. Now, amongst other primates, we're kind of in the middle. Bonobos, like almost all of them reproduce because they're just very sexually promiscuous. But amongst gorillas, it's like 1 or 2% of gorillas, males, have sex with all the females. Elephant bull seals, you might have one male have sex with 90 females, and like no other male gets to have sex with any of them. So the term is hypergamous or polygynous societies. Homo sapiens are somewhat polygynous, but because we become more egalitarian in our nature, women have become more polygamous. And what happens is there's a smaller and smaller group of men at the top who have unlimited options with women. And then let's look at the other end of the scale. This is the part, if you guys ever watch Professor Scott Galloway, he describes this really, really well. And I also like to point this out. Professor Scott Galloway is a political liberal. This isn't some political thing. Like, it legitimately, there's a group of men at the bottom, regardless if you're a Democrat or Republican, there's a group of men at the bottom that are being left behind. They're being left behind economically because, and this is, I'm not complaining about this, but because 60% of enrollees in college are now female, what's happened is there's fewer men going to college. And when those women graduate, they want men who make the same amount or more. In fact, a recent survey shows that women want about men who make about 65% more than them. So if a woman makes $100,000 a year, she wants a man who makes about $165,000 a year. Rihanna was worth several $100 million dating a billionaire. It was not a situation where when women became more wealthy, they didn't care about men's wealth. They actually care about men's wealth more the wealthier these women become and have fewer men to choose from. And of those men that are getting chose, there's a larger cohort of men that are not being chose at all. There's another study that shows that when men are unemployed or underemployed, that is a great determining factor about whether or not they've had any sex in the last year. Meaning, it's more likely that a man goes a year without sex, the less money he makes. There's a direct correlation, which proves that hypergamy is real. And so you have this bottom third of men that are just being left behind in the dating market because of the fact that women have very selective choice. And it's not that the women's choice has changed evolutionarily. It's the same as it always has been. They just haven't been exposed to so many men. Like, women all need it now because they can slide into the DMs of Drake, Michael B. Jordan, Tyga, whoever, because they can slide into Chris Hemsworth DMs, or you just pick any celebrity you want, Justin Bieber. They can slide in their DMs. Machine Gun Kelly, if you're hot enough, Machine Gun Kelly will write you back. I know this for a fact because I've talked to several girls who've written him, and he'll write you back. And then he'll invite you out on the jet. And it's like, as a woman, you're like, do I go on a date with Bob, who has a really great job? He's an accountant. He makes about $200,000 a year, and he worships the ground that I walk on. Or do I jump on this private jet that Machine Gun Kelly sent out for me to go party with him in Los Angeles next weekend? And more women are choosing the MGK route. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you saw one of my favorite things was those 23 women who were suing a man because he impersonated Lionel Messi. He looks exactly like Lionel Messi in the face, the famous soccer player. And these 23 women had sex with him, and then now they're suing him because he falsely impersonated Lionel Messi. My question to those women is, what would happen then if Lionel Messi's wife sued you? Because you had believed you were having sex with a married man, and you had no compunction against it whatsoever. It was no issue whatsoever. So it's one of these issues where it's like, you're starting to see women believe now that they should have access to high status men, and they're more willing to share high status men than to settle for low status men. And because of that, you see, again, about a third of men under the age of 30 or 28% of men under the age of 30 are virgins, I believe, something like that. And at one point in like 2018, 2019, it was 28% of men under the age of 30 hadn't had sex in the last year. Some number like that, which is really, it's probably even crazier than that because a lot of those men were paying for prostitutes. So it's probably in the 40 percentile, something like that.
So there's a lot to unpack here, and I love it because before we hit record, I'm very transparent with the viewers. Michael was like, "All right, I'm up, I'm ready to go," and I could tell you're passionate about this, dude, because you lit up the moment I gave you the mic. And there's a lot to unpack because for the guys listening, we talk a lot about our personal brand. We talk a lot about the resources that we can acquire, provide, and share with others, and we also talk a lot about how we show up in our world and the access that we have to resources. So one thing that you mentioned was the intersexual dynamic and social proof. I want to unpack everything that you just gave us because love your journey from beginning to end. For anyone that didn't look up the history that you've been through, you graduated, you were working as a manager at Gentlemen's Club. You see the events of 9/11 and you choose to enroll in the Air Force. That right there, folks, tells you the kind of man this is, a man of action, because he sees something that he can do and he enrolls in the Air Force. Coming out, you take the lessons you learn from managing gentlemen's clubs, you take the lessons from the Air Force, you go through finance, and you put all those lessons together into these courses that you've built under Men of Action. When you mention intersexual dynamics and social proof, let's start there for how that could help somebody. Let's say there's a man listening, he's in a city, he doesn't have many selections when it comes to jobs, not too many selections when it comes to women to date. He's trying to, get his life together and he's looking for that next step. Intersexual dynamics and social proof, how can that help him get to the promised land that you just so elegantly described?
So we have the what's called the first four steps of MOA. What you just asked is the absolute most common question I get. A guy starting from
Yeah.
zero in a place that's not super popular. He doesn't live next door to the Playboy Mansion. He's just living a normal life like the majority of hardworking Americans in this country. So the thing is, I have these first four steps, and the step number one is to fix your social media. You need your social media to be on point. There's a great video by Alex Hermosi that just came out a couple days ago, and he goes over where he ranks how different social media platforms work as far as generating business. He puts TikTok at far at the bottom. TikTok gets like an F, and he puts
Yeah.
Instagram and YouTube at the top. And I'm tell you personally, it's absolute.
Hmm.
You try to pick up women using LinkedIn and Twitter. Good luck, homie. Tell me how that fucking works for you, because it's not going to do. You're try to throw a party from girls you meet on Twitter. Tell me how that works for you. No, the way you're going to do it is you can build a profile on YouTube, and then you can actually. One of the things he talks about in the program is that Gen X and Gen Z and millennials prefer IGDM. If you're a guy and you're used to being around attractive women, you start to understand more and more that DMing women on Instagram is by far the preferred mode, whereas older guys are sending emails and doing text messages. And so once you learn these concepts, you're like, okay, well, I need to fix my Instagram. So just consider like, I don't know how it is in Charlotte, but here, all sorry, wild
You good?
weekend. Yeah, sorry. It's just 4 nights of partying for my birthday. I'm
I'm
recovering.
gonna hydrate
So
for you, bro.
yeah, there you go. I'm doing 75 hard, so I got to do a gallon a day. So now,
Eesh.
you consider. I don't know how it is in the city you live in, but where I live, all of our billboards are covered with personal injury attorneys. It's a very high markup career. The biggest personal injury attorney in the city is Steve Demopoulos. Is a good friend of mine here. And we consider from their standpoint, what they're doing is building a brand. And when you go to Steve's office, which I've been to there several times, everything is granite. It's beautiful. You're sitting on the most incredible couch you've ever sat on in your life while you're in the waiting room, having like immaculate coffee served to you in beautiful mugs. And then you go into his office, and it's very like everywhere you're just looking, it's just signs of success all over the place. Well, you can do the same thing with your social media. Consider if you're a man and your social media looks incomplete or just looks poor. It's the same thing as going to an attorney's office and you're missing a couch. You go to an attorney's office and there's like a wall missing in the office. You go to the attorney's office and the attorney is sitting there and there's no desk in front of him. It looks incomplete. As a man, you need to work on your social media in two parts. Number one, if a girl, don't take my word for any of this. Go find a beautiful woman that you're friends with or is dating one of your guy friends and ask them this question. You meet an attractive guy. What's one of the first things you're going to look at? She's going to tell you, especially the more attractive she is. I'm going to look at his social media. I'm going to look at his Instagram. She's going to look at his Instagram first. So having your Instagram set up to be really good to where guys or other potential employers or sponsors or whatever would want to hang out with you and hire you, and women would see that, hey, I can go on an adventure with this guy. He seems to have social proof where other women find approval in him. And you don't have to post pictures with women. Sometimes you can, but you don't have to. What's actually more important is that you have women liking the photos, women commenting, and women following you. That's actually what's most important as far as pre-selection, or what the term is called mate choice copying in evolutionary biology. If you'll have that phenomenon happen. So step number one is to fix your social media. Step number two is to build a list. My list, I usually try to have 10 times as many females as males. So it's going to be a Google spreadsheet, and I'm going to have maybe 2,000 female influencers I would want to come to a party. Let's just say I had a
Question.
huge party at, go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah.
why 10 times more females than males? What is the, I guess, the methodology or the thought process for like
Ready?
the focus on females?
Yeah, anybody who wants to throw an event, ready, you need to write this down. If you want 100 females to come to your party, you need to invite 2,000 females. If you want 100 men to come to your party, you need to invite 0. If you do that, you will get 100 men and 100 women. The more women are pulling themselves out of the IRL dating market, meaning they're not going to singles bars, they're not going to nightclubs, the more they're doing it, the more desperate men become. My birthday, like I said before, I invited I invited probably 1,700 girls, and I had about 35 show up in the end. So I'm there with 35 girls. I invited 0 guys, and I had 35 guys show up. They just showed up throughout the night. You just don't need, like, if you have a high status event, I'm going to tell you that, guys, this, and anyone who's done this before, you know this to be the case. If you have a high status event, you don't need to invite men. They will just show up in droves. You're going to get messages from like the biggest attorney in the city being like, hey man, can I come to your party? They're going to message you and ask you those questions. It's one of the craziest phenomena. And now, because they're coming to you and asking you a question, now later on, you are the person who comes off as being higher status. I used to go to Dan Bilzerian's Ignite parties when he had these 4 massive Ignite parties back in 2018 to 2020. And when you'd go there, the girls would go into the party and you'd see their boyfriends would be out on the street, and they had fire hoses. Ted, they had fire hoses and pepper spray to keep the men out. I'm not making this up. Look it up, dude. The guys were all armed with shotguns. And I remember I had Bilzerian on my show, and I say, hey, dude, were those shotguns loaded? He goes, yes, they were loaded. He goes, guys were crazy trying to get into these parties.
Yikes.
Men, because women are pulling themselves out of they're not pulling themselves out of the dating market, but they're pulling themselves they're putting themselves in a virtual dating market, meaning Instagram, OnlyFans, dating apps. Because they're putting themselves in a virtual dating market, what's happened is the IRL dating space, in real life dating space, is becoming harder and harder to meet single attractive women. It's becoming very difficult. I had a guy on my show one time. This guy's worth like $100 million, and he's like, "You just don't see 10s at the store. When you go to the mall, you just don't see 10s anymore." And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of agree." So what happens is, as this inequity becomes more and more prevalent, you have to create a great offer and a great party. And when you do so, you need to invite 10 times as many women as you want to come in order to get those women to come. If half of the women open your IG, by the way, so step number 2 is to build your list with 10 times as many women as men. Step number 3, so the 200, so it'd be 2,000 women and 200 guys. The 200 guys would be like the 200 guys. If you hypothetically had a podcast, these are the 200 guys you would want on your podcast. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And like,
kind of like the Dream 100 list in marketing, right?
That's exactly the dudes. Right. Yeah. The females are more like influencers. And by the way, like, for instance, on my podcast, I would love to have like Cody Sanchez and Jen Gottlieb. Those are influencers, but I don't want them because they're influencers. I want them because they're successful. Men or women, they're very successful people. So I'd still want them on my podcast. Even, it's not just all the male influencers don't have to be male. You can have some female influencers too. Like the mayor here in Las Vegas is female. So you can have stuff like that going on. So then step number 3, and this is the part that's very confusing to people, Ted. Step number 3 is to get as many open threads as possible. So I'll do invites, but Ted, this is the part that blows people's mind. And your audience is going to hear this and it's going to confuse them, but you just have to follow along with me. Just trust me on this one, okay? You invite girls to parties that they can't even get into. And you invite people to parties that you aren't even going to. And the only reason you're doing this is to get open threads. Ted, if you message me and I don't follow you and you don't follow me, it goes into the request folder. Yeah. The only point is to get them to respond at all to an offer that you have. And once you do that, now when your birthday comes up, Ted, and you have open threads with 4,000 girls, now you can hire a VA, message all those 4,000 girls, maybe over like 4 or 5 days with your VA. He maybe messages like 300 a day. And next thing you know, you've sent out invites to 4,000 girls, and then your birthday comes and 400 or 500 women show up. You understand? If you ever wonder how nightclub promoters do it, that's how they do it. So now at that point, when you have a ratio that's crazy, I'm reading Dr. David Buss's evolutionary psychology textbook right now. One of the things he goes over is on college campuses, the hookup culture is more prevalent because there are more women than men. In any sort of society or environment where there's more women than men, short-term dating strategies are adopted because men have more choice, and men tend to choose short-term dating options more than women do. When you have a different situation, like places in Alaska or certain type of traditional tribes, like Native American tribes, where there are way more men than women, then long-term dating strategies are enforced. And in fact, there's one tribe up in Alaska where there's polyandry is enforced or is encouraged, which is one woman marrying multiple men. Okay. Wow. So it just depends. So if you're a guy and you're like, hey man, I want to date around, I want to have a lot of options, and I want to date more attractive women, then one of the first things you want to do is create a ratio where there's 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. At Bilzerian's parties, he would say 7 to 1. He wants 7 girls for every guy to be at one of these events. And when he does so, there's no game, there's no talking, there's no charisma. Women are competing for your attention. And at that point, the guys tend to adopt a more short-term dating strategy and it works better. Again, so I've taken something from like that I've seen anecdotally, and then I'm comparing it to something that I see statistically when I read Dr. David Buss's evolutionary psychology books. So that's essentially what you're creating. So again, having these open threads, getting your requests out of the request folder and into the primary folder on Instagram is what your primary objective is. So that later on, when you have an important event, like for instance, let's just say the Super Bowl's in Charlotte one year, and you're going to have a party in Charlotte during the Super Bowl. Now you can go and message all those thousands of girls that were on your list. And when you message them, you're going to get a certain number to say yes, but your offer is so incredible that so many of them say yes. But here's the other thing. What about the girls who are really amazing, who would have never opened your message before, who even say, I can't make it, but thank you? Well, now I have an open thread with them. And so now, once I have an open thread with something, for those of you who don't know this, what happens is like you and I message, let's say I message some girl from Hungary, like from Budapest, Hungary. She's like stunning. And she writes me and I write her back. What'll happen is the feed, the Instagram feed will now show her my content. Oh, you didn't think about that one, did you? Now what happens is now she's seeing my content. I'm on top of mine. And when she comes to Las Vegas, I'm the first guy that she's going to message. And so now I've created a situation where there's a funnel where now I'm the cool guy to come see in whatever city that I live in. And I'm slowly creating a mid-tier level of fame. And then finally, the fourth step is you need to find 6 female teammates or 6 female friends, and you need to go to different events with those 6 female friends. It doesn't have to be the same ones. You don't have to be dating them. It's actually kind of helpful if you're not. And you go out there, and what you'll notice is having female teammates or female friends gives you 3 massive advantages. 1, it gets you invited to better parties. Number 2, it gets you really used to being attractive around attractive women. And then number 3, females are the number 1 source of me meeting more females. Usually, like my girlfriend was introduced to me by 4 different women. I was at a pageant I was hosting a bikini pageant in Mexico. And one of my friends texted me, he was like, hey, that girl that you were asking me about, she's here. So I go up there and they've just been talking me up the entire time. Women introduce you to other women. So this is what I would tell a guy, like your question before was, what would you tell a guy, an average guy living in an average city? Do those first 4 steps. You do those first 4 steps. Then from that, now we have a baseline for you to then be able to create events or to help other people with events. In Men of Action, you're not allowed to throw your own event in the first 6 months. You actually have to help other people with their events before you can throw your own event. You're a white belt when you first, join, whatever. So that's the technique we've been teaching. Like I said, I'm at 2,200 clients now. And I have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of testimonials right now. We're still filming testimonials from all the guys who've changed their life. There's no excuse. Like when you create that level of social standing, I have a client who's 4'11", who's dating this beautiful Italian woman. And the reason why he's dating her is because you would imagine 4'11", there's no way. Well, yes, because every time they go out, there's all these women coming up and hugging him, want pictures with him. And she understands she has to compete for his attention. And that's an attraction trigger for her.
If iron sharpens iron, so does one man sharpen another. But if you're a man and you're alone or listening to this, then who sharpens you? What's going on, guys? Ted Phaeton here, host of the Modern Man Podcast, also founder of the Noble Knights Mastermind Group. And I'm just out here encouraging you to find your circle. Maybe you're on a personal growth journey and nobody around you understands the new mentality that you're possessing. That's okay. You can find an online community that will pour into you, will navigate your goals and navigate your obstacles, share their experiences, resources, and more. Join the Noble Knights Mastermind Group and try us out for free to tap into a community of men helping each other scale up and reach their goals. Check out themodernmanpodcast.com. Yeah. And I know in my research, I saw you read something like more books than me a year, which I'm impressed by because I read a lot of freaking books. But was it 55 to 60 books a year you crush?
So the most I've ever done was 65. And that was when I was in the military and I had a lot more free time because I have to study for podcasts. I would say now pretty regularly I get through 35 a year. Some weeks I can get through 3 a week, but some weeks, like when I'm busy, I can get through 1 a week. Yeah.
Physical, audio, both?
It's both, but it's mostly audio.
Yeah, same. I do a lot of audiobooks, physical book by my bed. I'll probably crush 25 in a year to 30.
Yeah.
So those were the 4 steps that you'd break down, right? Kicking things off in terms of building more of that social proof. And I could understand when you're also posting, like you invite these women to the event, they don't come, but now you're in their feed, and then you actually have the social proof of, yeah, this is the event in which you missed out on and how good of a
Yeah.
time it was. You're certainly going to want
Yeah.
to be there next time, because now you have that
Yeah.
FOMO of like, damn, I should have
I had
listened.
this Yeah, I had this girl. Yeah, man, I dude, I'm so petty when it comes to this, Ted. The other night, I had this girl, and she's like, "Yeah, I want to go see Alinea on Saturday." Alinea like one of my favorite DJs here because I love dubstep, and so I go to see Alinea or whatever, and then she isn't able to come, and I text her. I'm like, "Hey, yeah, it sucked. Nobody was here." And then it's a video, and I'm standing right behind Alinea, and there's like thousands of people in front of him, and there's just this massive bass drop, and and then I saw it, and then she's just like, she's sending me the crying emoji because she's like,
Yep.
I saw, like, I like, she writes, "I really wish I should have come with you." I was like, "Oh no, it's no big deal. No one showed up. It was super boring." The other girl, she was like, she had to work on my birthday. She's like, "Man, I really wish I could have come." I was like, "Nobody showed up." And I sent her this photo of me with like 30 girls. Like, I'm very petty when it comes to this. And I'm gonna be honest with
Yeah.
you, like, it's really funny because what happens is, like what you said before, this is a phenomenon that I noticed a long time ago when I briefly lived in Los Angeles. I'd go to a nightclub and there would be girls outside in line and they would be bitching and crying. Like, "I can't believe they waited here. I know so and so." And they would feel very entitled. And you'd be like, "Wow, this girl's been insulted by this nightclub. She'll never come back." Nope. Next week comes back. They're the first girls back in
Every
line.
time.
I had this one girl, she was trying to go to one of the Ignite parties with Dan Bilzerian, and she got rejected from the guest list. So there's a girl who actually goes through the guest list and like kicks girls off. She got rejected from the guest list. This girl had 10 million followers on Instagram. She was furious. She couldn't believe she got kicked off the list. So you would imagine the next party would come along and she would be like, "I can't stand this." No, the next party came along and she got into the party and went. So no matter, it's
Hmm.
like, it doesn't matter if you insult someone, if you have enough status, they just don't care. I mean, look,
Yeah.
honestly, dude, how do you think Diddy got away with this nonsense for so long? It's because of his status. That's the reason why he got away with it. And so it's a
Mhm.
really, really, it's kind of a nasty lesson that you kind of learn about Homo sapiens, that we're so addicted to status and shiny objects. But like, if you're a marketer or if you work in sales, you know this thing to be true, and you know you have to use social proof in order to close the deal. And that's just
Yeah.
some, I teach you the ugly part of like human psychology, but not so that you can manipulate people, just so that you don't get manipulated. To be fair, a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
the guys who work in sales, a lot of guys who work in sales join my program because they're like, this is the first time somebody's like treating me, like telling me honestly what's going on and like why these phenomenon
Yeah.
exist. If you like the concept, like I said before, about
Mhm.
inviting all these girls to events, if you work in sales, that makes sense to you, right? You've done email blasts before. This makes sense to you. But other people are going to be like, "Oh man, that's so try hard." And I'm like, "Okay, enjoy try hard when you end up marrying someone you work with and she ends up divorcing you and taking half your money. Enjoy that. Tell me how that works out for you, buddy." Like, I think
Yeah.
men should have choice. The ultimate thing for men to have is choice. I'm not telling men out here to go sleep with a bunch of women. That's a bad idea. What I am telling you, though, is that a bunch of women need to find you attractive. You don't need to sleep with a bunch
Yes.
of women, but a bunch of women need to find you attractive. It is your
I'm
prime
glad you
directive
said
at
that.
this point in your life. It is your prime directive as a man to become maximally attractive.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because it's literally, I mean, and I've been out of the game for a while. I used to crush the dance floors. I used to be all in
Mhm.
the nightclubs. I had the suits. I'd go after work, and people were like, "Do you own the place?" I'm like, "No, I'm just
Yeah.
out here." And it felt great, but married man now, happily married, got a
Yeah.
daughter, and continuing to do the at home thing. But the grind hasn't changed, right?
Yeah.
Like, I still keep myself and my brand desirable, and that is not going to change. That's just how I am. Um, Piggybacking off of some of the tips that you gave some of the guys, I also want to lean into behavioral activation therapy, because we've covered cognitive behavioral therapy on this podcast before,
Yeah.
and it's very important because you talk about men of action. We're talking about this. Guys are probably listening, taking notes down because you've given so much value already. But notes is one thing, the books are another thing. But if you never get your butt off the couch and actually do some of this stuff, you don't get the results. So I'd
Yeah.
love for you to touch on behavioral activation therapy and its benefit for men in getting out of that funk, getting out of that depression, and actually getting some of this stuff done.
So rule number one in Men of Action is we don't pay attention to people's words. We only pay attention to their actions. We don't listen to the words. We only pay attention to people's actions. And this
Mhm.
is like, this helps you when it comes to business dealings. It helps you when it comes to dates. It helps you when it comes to anything. I only pay attention to people's actions. There's a great book by Jonathan Haidt called The Happiness Hypothesis. And on the cover of the book is a rider and an elephant. When you're talking to someone, it is the writer who's writing, who's communicating with you back, but it's the elephant who's in charge. The elephant is your subconscious. The writer on top of the elephant is your conscious. And so often, what'll happen is people will tell you one thing, but they're telling you what they want to believe or what they want their narrative to be, but their actions will be different, right? It's the fitness model who's secretly taking steroids. Like it's that kind of things. Like there's a hypocrisy going on, or it's the woman who tells you she only wants nice men, and you see all of her ex-boyfriends treat her like crap. That would be an example of the elephant in the writer. Rule number 2 in Men of Action is all human behavior can be explained through evolutionary psychology. I have yet to see this one fail for me. And so you can go through and you can actually use evolutionary psychology in order to describe any type of behavioral activation therapy. So let's take a look at this and say, from an evolutionary perspective, why would this make sense? So let's consider your ancestors. You still have the psychology of your ancestors because selection pressure ended as soon as Homo sapiens became the apex predator on the planet. Once groups of men picked up spears, now they are the apex predator over the elephant, the lion, the tiger, whatever. They're the apex predator on the planet. And then that's when you see an explosion of population. And then once we get the broad spectrum antibiotics in the 1940s, then we see the population there's 1 billion people on the planet in 1900 and 7 billion people on the planet in 2000, right? So, or 6.5 billion, somewhere around there. So now when you come to that realization, then it's like, okay, what are the things that aided us in survival? And you asked the question about behavioral activation therapy. Anything that would have aided us in survival, our brain would reward us for. So now consider 2 scenarios. During the Pleistocene, you have a guy who's sitting in a cave feeling sorry for himself because he wasn't able to catch the gazelle yesterday. And you have another guy who's like, I didn't catch the gazelle, but I learned a lesson. I'm going to go catch one today. The guy who is resilient gets back up and continues to fight to bring protein back to his tribe. He's going to be rewarded internally with more dopamine and serotonin. And then once he kills, like Ted, I'm telling you, there's no equivalent feeling, I think, for you and me that we'll ever have that is equivalent to like bringing meat back to our starving tribe when 50,000 years ago. There's probably no better feeling that you and I will ever have in comparison to like the survival. You think about the brutality of our existence, of Homo sapien existence 50,000 years ago. In fact, there 50,000 years ago, there's multiple forms of hominids on the planet. Once we get to 27,000 years ago, we've killed them all off and there's only Homo sapiens left. Neanderthal goes extinct. So when you think about those concepts, okay, what are the things that we would reward ourselves for, or society would have rewarded us for? And the thing is accomplishing goals, behavioral activation therapy, going out and taking action. When you take action, then that's a way. So now think of a great example. Go out and take a walk. You take a walk in sunlight. There's several studies that show this. You go out in sunlight, you take a walk, and it'll actually help your mood, right? That's an action that you take as opposed to reading affirmations in a book, but staying inside and then continuing to pack on body fat, which aromatizes testosterone into estrogen, which also can cause men to go through depression. So those are the things that you've learned through time. Evolutionarily, men taking action is a great way to cure depression. We just see it through an evolutionary lens. It just makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the equivalent of whenever I'm in a funk, I hit the gym and I feel better. Or Tuesdays,
Yes.
the day that we're recording this, I literally have work, gym,
Yes.
this, and then right at family time. I have no time to BS. And if I'm in a funk on Tuesday morning, I guarantee you by 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I feel
Yeah.
great because of my busy day.
Your
And there's
body,
just no way
your
around
body
it.
thinks, yeah, your body thinks you're taking action in order to go kill food for your tribe or build fortification or whatever it is. So your body rewards you with protein synthesis through testosterone, and it causes you to have bigger muscles. It causes you to have bigger muscles, and you need more testosterone, which what makes you more assertive, more aggressive. It makes you. It does all these things that make you more accountable as men. Helps you, gives you an ability to focus, all these different things. And so you're rewarded by behavior. You're rewarded with, the reward center in your brain fires and you actually feel better, and it can cure depression. Now, consider this. If I'm here telling you that eating better and then going out and taking action cures depression, what have I done to Big Pharma? I've crushed them. But Big Pharma does not like when people talk about this. They really don't like this idea of a holistic way for you to do a cold plunge, intermittent fasting, eat paleo, eat cleaner, and then go out, get sunlight every day, drink a gallon of water. There's these things you do, and then all of a sudden you don't have depression anymore. Well, then I don't need your erectile dysfunction drug. I don't need your ADHD drug anymore. I don't need your narcotic that's supposed to help me sleep. I don't need your Xanax. I don't need your Lexapro. I don't need any of these things anymore. I've
Yeah.
crushed big pharma by using holistic, what we call prehistoric methods in order for you to cure depression, which makes
Yeah.
more sense because you were evolved for a prehistoric time. You're not evolved for 2024. The only reason you still have the same psychology is because there's no selection pressure. There's 8 billion people on
Yeah.
the planet and 400,000 elephants. We won. Humans won. That's what happened. There's no selection pressure against humans anymore. So no matter what happens, like humans are not selected against ones that suffer from depression. As long as you live long enough to have children, there's no selection pressure.
Yeah, I'm going to tell it myself here, but you
Mm.
just described a lot of my practices with the cold plunge outside, my
Yeah.
workouts, my intermittent fasting, things like that. And
Yeah.
everyone who watches the podcast, they know I have ulcerative colitis. I was diagnosed in my 20s, landed in the
Yeah.
hospital, some nasty stuff, almost lost my large intestine, and I've been medicated for it. Literally just had a colonoscopy yesterday. That's what I'm
Yeah.
telling myself. But doctor, I wake up and the doctor's like, dude, colon looks great, you're good to go. And the nurses are baffled when I'm on the desk or on the stretcher because they're asking, do you do this? They're like, you're very healthy. And to your point, I control what I can control. I don't
Yeah.
have to rely on certain methods because I take care of myself in a holistic way through
Yeah.
dieting and cold plunging and workouts and applying the pressure.
One more time. Did your ancestors eat as many processed foods as you are given as an American, especially an American who lives in the South? Like growing
Yeah.
up in Texas, man, a chicken fried steak was like you took that with your vitamins. You covered it in gravy and you ate it at Sunday after church every single time. That's
Mhm.
what you just did because you grew up in Texas, man. You slathered barbecue sauce all over the barbecue because I grew up in Texas. And that was just what I was known, like high sodium, extremely high caloric meals. And then later on was when I started eating food that was less processed, then I started noticing that my health was better. And it's so funny how my doctor would never give me this advice. I have an autoimmune disorder, but I was given Enbrel for my autoimmune disorder. And what I told my doctor is like, yeah, I started eating paleo and now I don't have any of those symptoms anymore. And they don't write any of this down. They don't care. Like none of the feedback that they get from their patient means anything because they're told autoimmune disorder equals Enbrel. You need to give them Enbrel or Humira. That's what you do for an autoimmune disorder, period. And it's like, what if they just eat paleo and they just stop having the inflammation? No, that can't possibly be the answer because that's not what the
Mhm.
pharmaceutical company told me to do. Right. And so you have doctors who are really good people who study very hard, but they don't want to rock the boat and they end up becoming automatons and they start
Yeah.
prescribing you a pill for everything. And then when you end up like curing yourself, I just never understood why my rheumatologist is just never asking me about my diet, ever asking me about my diet.
Yeah.
I've never understood why endocrinologists never ask you about your diet. They're just like, hey, yeah, my total testosterone's in the 200s because I'm eating like shit. And it's like, well, 200 is in the normal range. Normal range for what? What if I want to fuck my wife, bro? 200 nanograms per deciliter. You think
It's
that's
not
the
enough.
normal range for a 32-year-old man? What is wrong with you? Anytime you leave an endocrinologist's office or a urologist office and they let you leave out of there with your testosterone levels in the 200s, those people should lose their medical license. You should lose your license to practice if you let a man leave your office with a 200 total testosterone limit. You should have your license taken from you if that ever happens. And so that's what I'm seeing more and more. We just gotten to that point, and it's like ancestrally, of course, I eat a more wholesome diet that is less processed. Of course, intermittent fasting. My ancestors wouldn't have been like, "Hey, split your meal up into 6 meals per day." It's like they don't have refrigeration. When they got food, they gorged the food. They ate as much as they could, as quickly as they could. They would eat maybe, if they were lucky, once a day, and had limited levels of protein that they were able to eat from. So that's what I do. I push my first meal. I eat breakfast at 5 p.m. Some people are like, that's crazy. There's no way to do it. Try it for a while. Your body goes into what's called ketosis and you start burning the fat more quickly. It's like, because that's what your ancestors did. It's hard for people to go out and walk around in sunlight for 45 minutes every day. Like, why would I do that? Because that's what your ancestors did. And when you do so, all of a sudden you started noticing all of these maladies, these diseases, these maladaptions, because you weren't designed for 2024. You weren't, especially if you live in a place like Los Angeles. The air quality there is absolutely atrocious. And you don't
Mhm.
understand why you're having all these why your skin is itchy and all this, and you're growing man. Why am I growing man boobs in my 30s? It's because you're breathing in estrogen. That's the reason why, because you live in places like that. You're drinking out of plastic water bottles. You were not adapted for this society. So when you do those things that help with your adaptation, tomorrow I have a podcast coming out on the 9th of October with Kasif Khan, and he goes over all these things, how your genetics you were not genetically created in order to say consume grains or consume lactose or consume gluten. You weren't able to do those things. So the closer we can get to your
Mhm.
what your Plasticine ancestors were living, the closer you get that, the healthier you'll feel, the
Yeah.
longer you will last, the longer your organs will remain healthy. And I just don't understand why, whenever I explain this to a medical professional, they don't want to hear it. And yet I'm 47 years old, out here
You look 30
running all
something.
day playing. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm out there. I'm 47 years old playing basketball every day, and they don't ask me how I'm doing it ever. And you're like you said before, you're sitting, you have colitis, and the nurses are like, "Wow, you look extremely healthy." Yeah, that's correct, because you live in North Carolina, where the average diet is probably massive levels of sodium and processed foods, and they're used to
And sweet
seeing
tea.
obese people and sweet tea, and they're used to seeing obese people. In the obesity rate in this country, we're in the 40 percentile now. That's madness.
Yeah.
How is nobody
Yeah.
saying that that's the issue? The answer is not Lexapro. The answer is to eat things. The answer is to honestly choose Chipotle over McDonald's. Say whatever you want about Chipotle. It is a great place to eat paleo. If you want to eat paleo, Chipotle is a way better place to eat paleo than some of these other. If you're going to eat fast food, then I would go with Chipotle over anything else, right? So that's what I would say. You see all these guys that are fitness guys and they eat Chipotle like fucking 4 times a day, right?
All
That's
the
what's going
time.
on.
Yeah.
So I would recommend intermittent fasting, cold plunge, or intermittent sauna or steam room. I would a 5-day
Yeah.
workout splits. Tear your muscles up. And then the other thing I would say is, if you're over the age of 35, because of the estrogens you've been exposed to throughout your life, the feminization of men, and I don't mean that as some sort of like red pill dogma or political conspiracy. It's literally called in biology the feminization of men, when estrogens are being added to your diet and your testosterone levels are dropping, which we know these things to be true. Go out to a TRT clinic, get your testosterone levels checked, and make sure that you are in an unhealthy low range. You need to be near the high level. The high level of the range is what's optimal. You do so, you're going to notice your life change. Your life is going to
Yeah.
absolutely change. You're going to thank me. You're a
Michael,
totally
man,
different reality.
I wish you were more passionate about this, bro. I really wish you were,
I
man.
just do when you see like what at the around the 200 guys that I had to come through my program, when you start to see like definitive levels of change. By the way, you want to know one of the great levels of change is when your ex-girlfriend who cheated on you starts messaging you, "I don't like what's happened to you." It's like, you cheated on me and you don't like how my life has changed? Of course you don't like it, because now you're
Yeah.
starting to realize you made a mistake. I often have clients hit me back up. I know when they're actually making a dent, when girls they used to date start messaging them from high school or whatever. That's when you know you're starting to make a dent. It's like,
Yeah.
you think you're all big. You think you're all big and tough because you're ripped now. It's like, okay, good. What you're doing is working now. A lot of guys, the people in your life don't like this change that you're going through. When you see that, you see sort of the cognitive dissonance from these people. That's when you know what you're doing is working.
Yeah. We're coming up on our time here, and I want to make sure I ask my last couple of questions.
Yeah.
And this one is just simple, straightforward for anybody that's taking all these notes, wanting to build their brand, become a local celebrity, throw big parties, increase their networking, their
Yeah.
resourcefulness. Because I would say that a lot of the tips that you applied, I'm taking notes because this applies to married men as well. If I want to
Yes.
have
We have
status and I
several
want to
married.
have options,
Yeah.
I need to continue to improve and up my network. To what
Yeah.
end is the question? Like, just to what end? What are we chasing? What are we going for? And what does it look like when we get there?
Um, to the end, I want you to be at a place where you can replace your. If you're a guy and you're single, you should be able to replace your girlfriend. You should be able to replace your social circle. You should be able to replace your job in 15 minutes. If you can't do this, you don't have enough abundance. You just don't. And I don't want, if you're a married man, by the way, I'd say about a fifth of the guys in MOA are married. I would say if you count married and divorced, it's over half the guys in MOA are married and have been divorced at one point. Um, if you or in a relationship, if you count that, one thing I want you to do is, you should not cheat on your wife ever. I do not encourage cheating. What I do encourage though is that if your wife thinks that you are so fat and such a loser that you could never cheat because you couldn't even find a partner to do so, you're in deep trouble. I'm telling you guys right now, if you listen to me, if you sit there and your wife knows for an absolute fact that if she left you alone with a bunch of beautiful women, you would have no chance of cheating, she will leave you. She will. There's no women are not going to sit there. If you just take 5 minutes and study the phenomena of female hypergamy, you're going to understand that this is wrong. So I definitely don't think you should cheat. But if your woman thinks you could never cheat, she's going to leave you. 80% of divorces in this country are initiated by women. The divorce rate in this country is 56% for first marriage, 63% for second marriage, 72% for third marriage, and 80% of those divorces are initiated by women. You want to learn more about that? Check out my good friend James Sexton, one of the most prominent divorce attorneys on earth. He just had dinner with me Friday night. James Sexton will explain to you, when you as a man stop fulfilling your needs and stop validating her, she will leave you so quickly. As soon as she sees any sort of financial turmoil coming up, he talks about these women just coming to him as soon as possible, being like, this is what is in the marriage. I want to split this in half really quick. I want to take half of what he's got. Right now, he just got a woman paid $900 million as a divorce attorney. He's right now he's got a client worth $8 billion with a B, billion dollars, and who's going through a divorce just because he met some stripper who was hot. Like, bro, I'm telling you guys, you need to know what's going on. If you don't, again, I'm not saying women are deliberately being, what's the word I'm looking for? Opportunistic, but women are being rewarded and encouraged to divorce men. And the number one way in the United States for a woman to become a millionaire, look it up. Don't think I'm making it. If you don't believe me, look it up yourself. The number one way that women are becoming millionaires right now is through divorce.
I always describe it as, in the dating world, you're presenting this ride, this roller coaster, right? And your future spouse, wife, decides she wants to ride that ride. But what
Yeah.
happens is you stop giving it maintenance, you stop going, you stop the loops and the upside downs and the curves, and then they get bored and they're like, well, this ride isn't what I thought it would be. So then they want to get off. Where
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep this ride going, bro.
Yeah.
I told my wife I'm never stopping, so she's been okay with that. Before I ask my last question, because we're coming up on our time, I want to first make sure that our audience can connect with you, follow you, pick up all the information that you're rolling out, and connect with Men of Action if they feel resonated with your brand, man. I'd love for them to
Sure.
get those sources. What's the best links?
Find me on Instagram. That's definitely the best way to do it. Just find me on IG. If you don't have an IG, that's the first problem. That's the first thing we got to fix. Secondly, the best way, I don't know if you've seen Sam Ovens and Alex Hermosi have come together with a new program called School, SKOOL. Go to our school group. At school.com, look up just Men of Action when you go to school. It's Men of Action free, Men of Action. Each word has a hyphen, so it's men of action free. So school.com, Men of Action free is the easiest way to find us. And if you've heard enough and you're sure you want to join our group, then just go to moamentoring.com. We'll set up a demo for you. And we're going to come up with like a detailed, personalized activation for you to be able to grow as far as networking, communication, leadership, and dating. Leadership, by the way, here's another piece of game. Leadership is the most underrated part when it comes to your job and when it comes to your dating life. Leadership is the thing that is the least studied. It is the most underrated player in the league.
Yeah.
Learning leadership is the thing that I teach guys that gives them a leg up on everyone else. And I think, especially in the dating space, I'm the only guy teaching leadership.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I'll have those links
Mm-hmm.
in the show notes below. Leadership's so important. So that's been
Yep.
a game changer for me in my world and everything that I've
Yeah.
experienced. So certainly glad that you were able to share that. And I'll have those links below. Last question before I get to let you go is, what is
Yeah.
something that you've seen or something that's happened to you that shapes the way you view the world as a man?
My father passed. My father was killed by a drunk driver in 2006, and then
Sorry, bro.
afterwards, six weeks later, I got sent to the Middle East for my first deployment in the Middle East. And while I was there, my girlfriend left me. She just left me. She from you think about it from her standpoint, we're still friends to this day, but like from her standpoint, it's like I just started dating this guy, and his dad is now dead, and he's out in the he just got deployed to the military, and she just started. It was Facebook back then. It's 2006, and so I'm watching her. She starts dating some other guy on Facebook, and then she writes me and tells me that she doesn't want to spend more time with me. And it was a very hard time for me. It was at this point that I started to look inward, and I read the book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and it changed my life.
Hmm.
It let me understand the present moment is the only thing that we have. I need to have gratitude for the fact that I'm alive, that I get to have these experiences, and I need to also recognize my own mortality. And in 300 years, the wealthiest man in the world, Elon Musk, and me will be exactly as dead as one another. We will be just the same level, exact same level of dead. And that should liberate you. It should liberate you to take action. That was a life-changing revelation for me, and it has changed all my behavior since.
I love that. Fantastic. Retired U.S. Air Force captain, former portfolio manager, founder of Men of Action, and some dude that could use a little bit more passion in his life, Michael
Yeah.
Sartain, on the podcast. Love that you were on, man. Thank you so much for the value and for all the gems, bro.
Awesome, Ted. I'll talk to you
Yeah.
soon, brother.
Absolutely. Really quick, I'm going to share some of the gems. I know we got to go, so I'm going to make it quick, but I
Yeah.
take notes along the way and I recap for the viewers who are working out, driving, or cleaning the house while working and things like that. But first and foremost, building your brand. For any guy that's listening to this is a recurring topic that we've mentioned on the podcast. Your brand is going to be your currency in life. You need to build your brand in order to have access to resources through networking, and whether it be dating, whether it be jobs. I love what you said towards the end, being able to replace your current position in 15 minutes, whether it's your relationship, whether it's your job, your source of income. You should be able to replace that resource in 15 minutes. The 4 steps that he shared: complete your social media, number 1. Number 2, build a list. Number 3, get as many open threads as possible. And then number 4, 6 female teammates and or friends to operate with. As you are building your brand, focus on behavioral activation therapy. It feels good to chase the things that keep us alive. In today's day and age, it looks a little different. It's not fighting the saber-toothed tigers or bringing meat back to the tribe, but it is going out there, making those cold calls, getting the bag, bringing it back home to your family, because I get that same success as I get to provide for my wife and daughter. And again, Saturdays for the boys. I don't think anyone picked up on it, but I picked up on the fact that Thursday you had the birthday party, Saturday you were playing basketball. Saturday is for the boys. I had to write
Yeah.
that down. And of course, as always, the present moment is the only thing that we have, as we said at the end. So, fellas, I appreciate you rocking with us. Make sure you give Michael that follow, check in with him if you loved his content. And as always, I say at the end of the episode, hit that like button, share this with somebody you know that can get value from it. That's one of the best things you can do for us to help us keep this going. And of course, leave us a rating to let us know how we're doing. And as I always say at the end of the episode, everybody wants the sunshine, but they don't want the rain. You can't get the pleasure without first the pain. Let's grow.